That weekend, while burning the midnight oil once again, I hit a breaking point. I realized that my boss wasn't assigning me difficult tasks to nurture my growth. He was doing it because I never said no. I decided it was time to change. In the weekend, to accommodate this new request, I included myself in a routine that kept my inner rhythm. "Why me?" I asked, my voice trembling slightly. "I already have a full workload." "Because you're the best at this," he said curtly, brushing off my concerns. On Monday morning, I walked into his office with the completed report. Before he could assign me anything else, I spoke up. "Mr. Coleman, I need to talk to you. I've been handling the toughest tasks for 2 years, and it's taking a toll. I'd like to discuss a fairer distribution of work." He looked surprised. "Julia, I didn't realize you felt that way. I thought you thrived under pressure." "I do enjoy challenges," I replied, "but not at the expense of my health and personal life. I want to contribute, but I also need balance." To my surprise, he agreed to reevaluate the workload distribution. Over the next few weeks, I noticed a difference. My colleagues started taking on more complex projects, and I finally had room to breathe. Standing up for myself wasn't easy, but it taught me an important lesson. People won't value your limits unless you set them. A month later, during a team meeting, Mr. Coleman introduced a new policy. Tasks would be rotated to ensure everyone shared the workload evenly. While some of my colleagues grumbled about their new responsibilities, I felt a sense of relief. For the first time in years, I could focus on delivering quality work without feeling overwhelmed. But something else happened that I hadn't anticipated. With the extra breathing room, I started excelling in ways I hadn't before. I had time to refine my presentations, research innovative solutions, and even mentor a junior colleague. My confidence grew, and so did my reputation. One day, Mr. Coleman approached me after a meeting. "Julia," he said, "I've noticed how much more effective you've been lately. I was wrong to pile everything on you before. You've really impressed me." His words took me by surprise, but they reaffirmed my decision to speak up. "Thank you," I said, "but it wouldn't have been possible without the balance we've achieved as a team." Perfect. From then on, I became an advocate for healthy work boundaries. When I saw my colleagues struggling, I encouraged them to voice their concerns. It wasn't just about me anymore. It was about fostering a culture where everyone felt valued and respected. Years later, when I moved on to a new job, Mr. Coleman gave me a glowing recommendation. "Julia taught me something important about leadership," he wrote. "Great leaders don't just assign tasks. They listen, support, and empower their teams to thrive." Looking back, I realized that standing up for myself wasn't just about fairness. It was about creating lasting change for myself and for those around me. At my new job, I made a promise to myself. I would never let history repeat itself. On my first day as a team lead, I gathered my small group for a meeting. "I know what it feels like to carry more than your fair share," I said, looking around the room. "So here's my promise. We'll divide the workload fairly, and if something feels unmanageable, speak up. I'd rather solve problems together than let anyone burn out." The team seemed surprised by my openness, but it didn't take long for them to appreciate it. I encouraged regular feedback, held check-ins to make sure no one was overburdened, and celebrated small wins to keep morale high. One day, a junior team member named Emily stayed late to finish a complicated project. When I found her still at her desk, I remembered my own late nights under Mr. Coleman. "Emily, why didn't you ask for help?" I asked gently. "I didn't want to bother anyone," she said, shrugging. I smiled. "You're not bothering anyone. You're part of a team and we succeed together. Let's figure this out." We finished the project together, and from that moment on, Emily became more confident about asking for support. Watching her grow reminded me why I had fought so hard for balance in the first place. Over time, our team became one of the most productive in the company. We weren't just efficient. We were happy. And that happiness translated into better results. One afternoon, my boss called me into his office. "I've been hearing great things about your team," he said. "What's your secret?" "It's simple," I replied. "When people feel respected and supported, they give their best." As I left his office, I realized something profound. The struggles I'd faced under Mr. Coleman weren't wasted. They had taught me to lead with empathy, to set boundaries, and to create a culture where everyone could thrive. Une Anlena, and for the first time in my career, I felt truly proud. Not just of what I had achieved, but of the environment I had helped build. Yes, months later, during a company-wide meeting, I was surprised to hear my name called. My boss stood at the podium, smiling as he announced, "Today we're recognizing one of our most outstanding team leads. Julia has not only achieved incredible results, but has also created a work environment that others want to emulate." I walked up to accept the award, my heart racing. As I looked out at my team clapping and cheering, I felt a deep sense of gratitude. This wasn't just my achievement, it was ours. After the meeting, Emily approached me. "You deserve it," she said with a grin. "You've changed the way I think about work. And, honestly, about myself." Her words stuck with me. I thought about my younger self, the one who'd stayed silent while carrying the weight of impossible tasks. Back then, I had no idea that speaking up would lead to something bigger than just personal relief. Eventually, the company promoted me to a senior leadership role. The announcement came with a new challenge. I was tasked with revamping the company's entire approach to team management. It was a daunting responsibility, but I was ready. I started by implementing a mentorship program, pairing experienced employees with newer ones to foster growth and collaboration. I also introduced regular wellness check-ins, encouraging employees to prioritize their mental and physical health. Slowly but surely, I saw a shift in the company's culture. One day, during a town hall, my boss said something that made me pause. "Julia has been a driving force behind our success," he told the audience. "She's shown us that when you empower people, they don't just meet expectations, they exceed them." Looking back, I realized how far I'd come since those days of endless late nights and unspoken frustrations. What had started as a small act of courage, standing up to Mr. Coleman, had turned into a lifelong mission to create workplaces where people felt valued. And that, I knew, was the greatest achievement of all. As I stepped into my new role, I began to reflect on the ripple effect of small changes. Standing up for myself years ago had seemed like a personal victory, but now it was clear that it had transformed into something much larger. In my first month overseeing the company's management practices, I introduced workshops for leaders, focusing on emotional intelligence, active listening, and workload distribution. At first, there was resistance. Some managers were skeptical, clinging to outdated ideas about authority and control. One of them, Mark, voiced his doubts during a session. "This all sounds good in theory," he said, "but aren't you worried that being too soft will make people lazy?" I smiled, remembering similar thoughts I'd once had about balance and boundaries. "Actually, Mark," I replied, "it's the opposite. When people feel supported, they work harder, not because they have to, but because they want to. It's not softness, it's smart leadership." He frowned, considering my words. But over the next few weeks, I noticed a change in him. He began checking in with his team more often, redistributing tasks, and even joining in on brainstorming sessions. One day, he stopped me in the hallway. "I didn't think this would work," he admitted. But my team is performing better than ever. I guess I owe you an apology. And a thank you. Moments like these kept me going, even when the work was challenging. I knew I couldn't change an entire company overnight, but little by little I saw progress. Teams began collaborating more openly, employees started advocating for themselves, and the overall atmosphere shifted from one of pressure to one of purpose. 6 months into my role, I received an email from Mr. Coleman, my former boss. I hadn't spoken to him in years, and seeing his name in my inbox brought back a flood of memories. The email was brief, but heartfelt. Julia, I've been following your career from afar, and I wanted to say how proud I am of what you've accomplished. You've turned what could have been a bitter experience into a legacy of leadership. Thank you for teaching me, and so many others, that true strength lies in empathy. Best regards, Mr. Coleman. I stared at the screen for a long moment, feeling a mix of emotions. His acknowledgement felt like the closing of a chapter, a confirmation that every struggle I had endured was worth it. Now, as I look toward the future, I know there's still work to be done. And sometimes, that's all it takes to transform everything. A few years later, I found myself invited to speak at a leadership conference. The theme was empowering teams through empathy, a topic I had grown to understand deeply. Standing on the stage in front of hundreds of industry leaders, I felt a familiar flicker of nervousness, but it was quickly replaced by determination. I began with my story. How I had once been the overworked, silent employee who thought endurance was the only way forward. I shared how a single moment of courage to speak up had not only changed my life, but had also laid the foundation for a culture of fairness and collaboration in my workplace. I'm not here to tell you that leadership is easy, I said, scanning the audience. It's not. It takes effort, introspection, and a willingness to admit when we're wrong. But when you lead with empathy and empower your people, the results speak for themselves. After the session, attendees flooded me with questions. They wanted to know how to handle resistant employees, how to encourage honest communication, and how to balance empathy with accountability. I answered each question with the lessons I had learned, realizing how much my journey had prepared me for this moment.